मालूम ही नहीं है कि लोग आज क्या कहा, और मैं वही बात दोबारा नहीं दोहराना चाहती, तो कम बोलूँगी। मुझे लगता है कि अभी आने वाले सालों में हमारे साथ जो खतरा होने वाला है वो बहुत बढ़ेगी, क्योंकि सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम ये है कि पूंजीवाद जो है, पूंजीवाद अब खतरा में है। Is it better to speak in English? Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to say that in the coming years there is going to be a great escalation of conflict, and this escalation is going to come because capitalism is in a very serious crisis. And I don't think that any of us have understood how serious that crisis is. But I have been saying this for a few years now, but if we look back, addressing the anger of Latif Bhai, the fact is that in the late 80s and the early 90s, 2 locks were opened in this country. हमारे देश में 2 ताले खोले गए थे. One was the lock of the Babri Masjid, and one was the lock of the Indian market. And these 2 locks were opened right at the time when the world became a unipolar world, when America won the battle in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union and the Berlin Wall fell. And we know that when the US was fighting that war in Afghanistan, it created this Wahhabi model of jihad. America created it. The CIA created it. The CIA funded the ISI. We all know this, but nobody talks about it. Even if you want to trace that battle back, it will be traced up to ISI, but never back to CIA. But it was consciously created. This model of Wahhabi Islam, modern Wahhabi Islam, was consciously created, funded, educated and created. Manufactured 2 kinds of terrorism. The lock of the Babri Masjid manufactured for the state the idea of Islamic terrorism, and the lock of the market manufactured the idea of the Maoist terrorists. And both of them allowed the government, whether if the BJP was in power, then the Islamic terrorism was prioritized. If the Congress was in power, the Maoist terrorism was prioritized. But it allowed both governments, whether it was the Congress or the BJP in power, to create a police state, to create a militarized state. And today we are now heading towards, obviously, the deployment of the Indian Army. The army has been deployed, of course, in Kashmir and Manipur and Nagaland for many years, in Telangana too, in West Bengal at one time, in Punjab. But now they have deployed it. Actually, 5,000 soldiers have already moved into Hyderabad. And while Iram Sharmila is fasting to have the Armed Forces Special Powers Act removed from Manipur, actually the more realistic scenario is that it is going to be promulgated in central India, because the army will not engage unless it has legal impunity. So while we argue about who is the greater victim, the fact is that the whole idea is to divide these victims, make them fight each other. I released this book I can't read what it says, and I don't know what it says.
Captive prisoners.
Captive prisoners. But when we're talking about the committee for the release of political prisoners, I actually don't know what we mean by political prisoners. Because to me, a poor person in jail on a normal criminal charge is also a political prisoner. You know, it's not only Maoists and it's not only, Muslim people who have been picked up, innocent people who have been picked up and accused of being terrorists, but ordinary poor people who are the victims of such a social system, they are also political prisoners. So we must be very clear about what do we mean by political prisoners and who are we only going to represent narrow sectarian interests, or are we going to look at a broader understanding of justice? Because today the danger that faces us is that in the Cold War with Russia, America made Pakistan its ally. And you can see what it did to Pakistan. It created civil war, it divided that society, it destroyed it. Not just with the CIA and the military, but also with money. Also with deciding how to empower who. It destroyed Pakistan. Today, they are trying to make a Cold War situation with China, and because Afghanistan and Pakistan are unstable, they are trying to use India as their ally. So if you look at what all these multinational corporations are up to, if you look at all the weapons manufacturers, you read the paper after the budget, this country, which has 800 million people who live on less than 20 rupees a day, has the highest military budget in the world. And we know that the countries of Europe and America and Israel, their economies depend on the sale of weapons now. They've outsourced every other kind of manufacturing, but not the manufacture of weapons. So we are in a situation where the Indian government, led by Manmohan Singh, who many people see as an IMF representative in India, it's not just being an ally of the United States does not mean that Barack Obama calls Manmohan Singh every weekend and says, "Hello, Mr. Singh, how are you?" It doesn't mean that. It means that at every level, from the US Special Forces operating on the ground, to the sharing of intelligence, to the buying of nuclear reactors, to the opening up of FDI, to the opening up of the education sector, to the opening up of the agriculture sector, to the standardization of the market so that global capital can penetrate further. It means that you're being held in such a close embrace and forced to dance. And if you refuse to dance, you will be burned. You will be destroyed. That is what this alliance means. You know, the big corporations, both in India and in the world today, they are sitting on huge amounts of liquid cash. They don't know what to do because the crisis is such, they don't know where to invest it. So, if you read the signs, the big investment right now is going to be in the education sector. We don't understand how these people operate. You know, we just think it's about Operation Green Hands and Army. No, that is only one end of it. You know, demonizing the Muslim community and picking up young people and putting them in jail, changing the language in which the Muslim is represented or phrased, that is another part of it. But there are a whole lot of things happening which are just like ordinary business. But it is so frightening. You know, it's not a coincidence that Sri Ravi Shankar says all education should be privatized. Because Hindutva and big business are together. And they are together with the United States. And Modi is the representative. It is not a coincidence that he is on the cover of Time magazine. You know, it's not a coincidence that on the 10th anniversary of the massacre of Muslims in Gujarat, Modi had a meeting with 10,000 businessmen who promised to give $450 billion. That's blood money. So even though he stands accused of having not just allowed but abetted those murders, those rapes, those burning alive of people, that blood money is now being used to campaign and say this man should be the Prime Minister because he is a hard state, because he can sort out the problem in the forest, he can sort out the problem of these urban activists, he can push through the whole new agenda for capitalism, which means only through war, only through violence, only through an extreme push of violence can they continue their investment. So you look at the education sector. The reason they have changed all the universities to semester systems is because the American universities want to franchise now. They want to open Harvard and Cornell and all this in India so that they can get money from here. Already Tata has donated $50 million to Harvard Business School, $50 million to Cornell. The Reliance has donated to Yale. Infosys has donated to Yale. Mahindra has donated to Harvard. So it's going to all be like that. You know, it's going to be education, agriculture, nuclear, army, intelligence, special force. It's like you're going to just become a formal colony of the United States. So we have to understand and not allow our victimhoods to separate us. We have to understand there's a very, very serious game planned here. I've just written a big article called Capitalism, a Ghost Story. You look at these big foundations like the Observer Research Foundation, which is right now endowed by Mukesh Ambani. The institutional partners there, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Brookings, Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, all working together to see how to extract capital. If you look at the biggest business houses in this country today, who are they? Tata, Ambani, Vedanta, SR, Jindal. How are they so big? Because they are businessmen who can sell what they don't have to buy. Because they have been given the mountains and rivers and forests of this country. And they're just being allowed to get rid of the people now. So I think we have to re-understand who our enemies are and how they are working, and why it is that this language is being allowed into the mainstream. After all, now do we all know that earlier we knew that almost 90%, maybe 80% of the turnover of the corporate media came from advertising, corporate advertising. But today the situation is in a different space. Reliance has bought 27 television channels. It has a controlling interest in 27 television channels. ETV, TV18, CNN, IBN, Lokmat, 27 TV channels. Newspapers like Dainik Bhaskar, for example, have 60 companies where they own mining companies, they own power companies. So what is the difference between the press and the corporations and the courts and the parliament? There's no difference. The politicians are big mining barons, the press owns corporates, the corporates own the press. So all of it is a theater now, and we have to find a way of understanding and fighting it, not just complaining about each other, because that's going to get us absolutely nowhere. ये सही बात है कि हमारे जो अखबार है उसमें जब कोई मासूम मुसलमान नौजवान को पकड़ लेते तो वो जरूर कहता कि टेररिस्ट है। लेकिन रमन सिंह ने जो कहा छत्तीसगढ़ में, जो जंगल से बाहर नहीं आएगा उनको माओइस्ट टेररिस्ट समझा जाएगा। दैट मीन्स पहले जब हमारा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन लिखा गया तब an आदिवासी became a criminal because the forest belonged to the forest department. Everything that he did was criminal, or she did was criminal. But today, if an Adivasi in Bastar is only planting seeds and taking his goats for chara, he's a terrorist. It has become terrorist activity to stay in your village and not come out. So the fact is that these two locks that were open and these two processes that were set about were very, very deliberate, because it's a way of weakening the opposition. And when we play into it, we do exactly what they want us to do, which is to fight each other. So I just want to leave you with this, that today India, before 1989, India was a non-aligned country. It said it was a friend of Palestine. Today, it says it's a natural ally of US and Israel. When the journalist Kazmi was picked up, he was picked up because there is a big international climate change going on, of how to isolate Iran and how to attack Iran, how to create a situation in which India is forced into supporting the US against its own interests in the attack on Iran. So all these things, from what is happening in Bastar to what is happening in Iran are linked up in a very serious way. They are linked up because the United States of America is in a very serious crisis. It's a country that taught its people how to live in debt. It taught its people how to run to keep up with its own lifestyle. So it used other countries' money to keep the mass consumption of its own society going. Now that other countries' money is mostly China's money, but the American economy is collapsing, and how is it going to climb back? It has always used two techniques: war and shopping. War and consumption. Stimulate consumption. But those are not going to work now. So when the biggest power in the world with the most bombs is in trouble, it's going to be trouble for all of us. We've even lost the ability to ask the question, how can a country sitting on thousands of warheads say that Iran can't have nuclear weapons, I'm going to bomb you if you have nuclear weapons? How can they, with what faith can they say it? But they are saying no talk of Israel's nuclear weapons. So we have to sometimes start from first principles, and we have to understand that today our government is forcing us to be the ally of the most dangerous country in the world, which is selling us into this very dangerous embrace. And everything that is happening somehow is connected to that. Thank you.